Right. Keith Wolahan is the Liberal MP for the seat of Menzies in Melbourne's, right here in Melbourne. He's one of the few Liberal MPs who's got a seat close to the heart of Melbourne. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Raf. How are you?
Let's start small and then go big. Should Kevin Rudd stay?
I think he should. He is our current ambassador. He's got a job to do. He's, despite his politics, a highly competent, intelligent person. But no one's pretending there isn't a challenge to overcome here. But we have some of our best staff in that embassy, and I'm sure they're working around the clock on it.
Your colleague, Dean Smith, the senator from WA, he said, look, fighting a losing battle. Nothing wrong with Kevin Rudd, but Kevin Rudd should pack his bags. Is Dean Smith right?
Well, I think Dean Smith is being very frank in his opinion. I think this is a difficult challenge, but I think it can be overcome. Time may prove Dean to be right, but I think we should give it our best efforts, and I think they're doing that right now.
Is it a story that is being pushed by the Murdoch press? Like that, Kevin Rudd ran a campaign to have a royal commission into Rupert Murdoch's media organisations. They are very definitely keen on the story. Are they pushing it for revenge, do you think?
Well, no one would accuse you of pushing it for revenge.
No, I'm not asking about my coverage. I'm asking about theirs.
No, but it's a story. When you listen to what he said, it would be silly to ignore it. It would be silly to ignore it because there will be a meeting and someone will whisper in the president's ear, hey, this guy just said, and everything you just said. So we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it, and it would be insulting to ignore the problem that we have.
It's also a problem, isn't it, when fealty to the person is deemed to be more important than faith in the institution?
Well, not really. Look at some of the people that Trump has appointed, including his own vice president. J.D. Vance had some serious negative commentary. Well, and other things.
Worse, if you can have worse. Yeah.
But that proves that this doesn't end at all. There are ways for things to move forward and for the institutions to still be productive.
1300 222 774 is the phone number. Keith Wolahan is an MP in Melbourne. The Liberal Party don't have too many MPs in Melbourne. In fact, Keith has told me that if he stands in the building he's in Doncaster and looks out, he can't actually, I don't think that he can see a Liberal seat if he looks south and west. Keith, the language that Donald Trump uses, especially the language he uses about the media and migrants, the media are the enemy of the people, migrants are vermin, that is authoritarian, demagogic language. Is it a problem?
When you look at the results from the US election and you break it down through demography and exit polls, what is really clear and interesting is that migrants swung to Trump. People of diverse backgrounds swung to Trump. Working class people swung to Trump. And I think they did it in spite of the commentary. They did it because they put a premium on the economy, on how they're feeling financially, and they did it because they want a better economic future, not just for them, but for their children. And I think that those were the key factors in the election.
Does it encourage you to talk about immigration here?
It doesn't encourage us, but I think we should talk about immigration. If we look at the last term of Parliament, Australia's population has grown by 15 MCGs, almost 1.5 million people. In the last year through to June, there was 656,000 more people in this country. I'm a migrant. My seat is 70% first or second generation migrants. But we need to have a conversation about the number that's proportionate to our capacity to build infrastructure and preserve green space. And at the moment, Melbourne is feeling that strain. I'm sure many people who are listening to this right now are noticing it in traffic. They're noticing the state of the Eastern Freeway. I've seen footage of kangaroos coming through suburban areas that haven't been there before. That's because we're putting strain on this city and people feel it.
Does the language that's used around immigration, because I would call Donald Trump's language on immigration extreme. It is certainly getting tougher in Europe, the words that people use when they are politicians. Does it mean your language on immigration needs to be or will be tougher?
We will use our own language, but we have always had a bipartisan support for a generous migration scheme, but the social license for that is that it's proportionate. And
Has it snapped? Bridget McKenzie says it's snapped.
Well, when you look at the numbers, it is disproportionate. We're struggling with housing. We're struggling with preserving green space. And I'll take you back to an article that George Megalogenis wrote over 10 years ago, where he looked at the cities in the most livable index for The Economist. And bar one, which was Toronto, no city above 5 million stays in the happiness index, not in the top 10. And I checked recently, and Toronto fell out. Now, we're at 5.5 million. And the observation that George made then, and I think it's valid now, is that governments really struggle past 5 million. They struggle to keep a city with low crime, low congestion, green space, good hospital, schools, all of the things that make Melbourne livable and keep it happy.
You are the representative, though, of a party that, I mean, I'm trying to, keep my language polite and not extreme, but you didn't do much. There wasn't really an immigration plan. Like, you were there for 9 years. There is an immigration system that it's very difficult for governments to plan for migration. You neglected that problem for 9 years, and now you're trying to reap votes off it. Isn't that hypocritical?
Well, I'll correct you on this. I'll always admit where things have gone wrong, including for my own party. I've never shied from doing that. But when you look at the numbers, the proportionate numbers for Australia, it was a balanced number. It was a balanced number that was balanced with our capacity to build the infrastructure, preserve green space at a state and Commonwealth level. The numbers have exploded since.
But that's a system
22.
you guys allowed to explode. You didn't retool the system. Governments don't set I don't want to get into the detail, but governments don't set a flat, full stop number. You let the system decline. You're part of the problem.
Well, no, this has happened since 2022, since May 2022. Of course, there was a spike after COVID. No one's pretending that didn't happen.
But it's about the levers that you can control. Ignoring the migration system means it makes it harder for the current government to control.
We are almost 3 years since the coalition was in charge of those levers, and it's in that time that we've seen 15 MCGs come to Australia. And Melbourne is a very attractive city, so a huge percentage of that has come to Melbourne, and we're trying to deal with that, and we're struggling at the moment.
It's 4 minutes to 9. I'll get to your calls on 1300 222 774. Should Kevin Rudd stay? Is Donald Trump going to have an impact on our politics? Is he going to change our politics? Inflation, Keith Wallahan, is the incumbent killer. It seems to be the case around the world that inflation means governments get turfed out. Is that what's going to happen here? Are you going to rely on inflation to win government?
We're going to put our faith in the Australian people to see if we can earn the trust of the Australian people for each individual seat, and that applies to me, but also as a coalition seeking a mandate to be in government. Historically, it's very hard for first-term governments to lose, so that's the context in which we're going to this election. But people are hurting, and yes, inflation... And
you opposed two significant things that helped them, didn't you? You opposed the energy bill relief, and you opposed spreading the tax cuts down the income scale. So the two significant measures where this current government wanted to help people, you opposed them.
Well, and this is an important point. There's two ways you can approach this. One is to address the causes of inflation, or you address the symptoms. This government has been focused on the symptoms. So at the one hand, they're saying, well, here's $10 to help you with the cost of living. But on the other hand, inflation and taxes and all of the other things are taking $100. It's a 10-to-1 ratio. So, we'll be told, oh, well, the government's here to help you. The only way the government can bring inflation down is to bring their own spending down. That's what the Reserve Bank has noted. That's what the economists are noting. And that's what's hurting people.
The language that's used by the Republican Party, an ad that says Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. Is some of that language going to be used by the coalition, do you think?
One of the many lessons from the last election that I took and my colleagues have taken is that tone does matter in how you conduct yourself and how we speak. And I think I'm from Melbourne. I'm a proud Melburnian. I think we like a civilised tone in this city. And I've always tried to conduct myself that way.
Peter Dutton hasn't always been the most polite of politicians, has he?
Well, he's had a long career. There's going to be times when, he said a word or something.
He's known for some of the toughest stuff on migration,
well,
isn't he?
I think a lot of it is a cartoon image of Peter Dutton. A cartoon image, a narrative rather than the truth. But again, that's the real Peter Dutton and I think Australians have seen that in this last term. The real Peter Dutton is actually a genuine, decent person who's focused on the interests of Australia. And he's a very compassionate person as well.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.